joining us, hopefully. And we have the run sheet here, so we'll turn to Greg to do the opening Karakia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Morena, everyone. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia ma kinakina ki uta, kia ma taratara ki tai, ihi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, he hei, Māori ora.
Thank you. All right, so apparently I'm supposed to confirm when the meeting will conclude, but that's really up to you guys. But certainly if we're here by lunchtime, something's wrong. So I'll ask for apologies if there are any. I know Robbie is trying to get online. We've just been talking to him. So one for lateness for Robbie. Are there any other apologies? I'll move that the apology and Councillor Mahuta and Councillor Downard. So we've got Councillor Mahuta, Councillor Downard for absence and lateness for Councillor Cookson. So I move Councillor Story and Dunbar Smith. All in favour? Against? Carried. Any amendments to the agenda? Really only got the two items. So we'll carry on. So can I have a move? I'm about to do that. Just let me think, all right? Okay, thank you. 1 and 2. All in favour? Carried. Right, so we're now any disclosures of interest? There are no disclosures of interest. We'll move on. And Greg, can we now have you introduce your staff who will be attending?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Morena again. So paper today is covering recommended transfer from our regional disaster reserve through to our various zone operational reserves, which have been carrying quite a significant amount of additional expenditure following the multiple weather events that happened across the North Island in the earlier part of this year. I'm joined today in the room here. We've got Adam and Grant, who both of their areas were impacted during those events. Also online, we have Kerry Nielsen, who's our Waipa Zone Manager, and also we have Team Whitianga. So we have various staff there to help to provide any questions that the committee may have around the situation that we're dealing with today. Mr. Chairman, so this paper it's one that it's a matter that we have previously dealt with as a council. It's a fairly normal thing in terms of where we have bigger events. There's consideration as to whether the magnitude of those events triggers the use of either our zone-based disaster reserves or our regional disaster reserves. In this situation, what you'll see from the information provided is that we have assessed that it is appropriate to consider a drawdown from our regional disaster reserves for the Waipa, Lower Waikato, Waiho, Piako and Coromandel zones. So the information is summarised in the paper, Mr. Chairman, along with some details in terms of the work that has been required, both in terms of response costs and remediation costs. I would note that the work is not yet all done, and there's certainly more remediation to be done over the coming years of work programme. At this stage, the committee is simply being asked to consider the covering of costs that have already been incurred in the previous financial year for the work done. Just noting the potential for future consideration of that work down the line. Look, there's plenty of detail based split up zone by zone in the report. So it's all right with you, Mr. Chair. I'll have to take it as read and move to questions.
Could I just point out the process from here? So if we end up being satisfied with the report and recommend it, it then moves to finance where it will be dealt with. So that we're endorsing, the recommendation is to endorse the movement and finance will deal with the movement. Just so you know, we're not actually approving it, the movement today, just endorsing it if we are happy with that. So questions? It's obviously a pretty good report. Bruce.
Yeah, so you made a comment through the chair, Greg, about there's still work to be done. And on reading the report, it looked to me like it's essentially focused on hard infrastructure. Wondering about damage to things like riparian planting, other impacts on the environment, which might need or require some rehabilitation in the future. Is that what you meant by additional work that needs to be done?
It's additional work of the same nature. So when you look at the kind of the recovery, the response costs, a lot of those are to do with our hard infrastructure and the work that was required to sustain the performance of that infrastructure during these events. When you look at the remediation, actually a lot of it is, in fact, almost all of it is around our natural assets and our river management work in all zones. And it involves clearance of blockages that have occurred during those events, erosion that has come to pass. The team have done a substantial amount of work to understand what that scale of work looks like across the various zones, and then prioritise the work based on need and urgency to get the I guess the most important work done first, and that's what you have today. In terms of going forward, it is primarily around our natural assets and primarily our river management areas.
So can you give us some examples? Because again, you're talking about gravel and removing of a blockage of a drain, and while that's important, rehabilitation of a system that's been badly damaged, an ecological system or a particular habitat feature, and in the case of riparian planting, will require quite a different style of work. Could you expand on that a bit?
Maybe, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I'll pass to our Whitianga team, who might be able to give a good outline of some of the plans that they are looking at in the Coromandel. And we are joined by Kerry as well from Waipa, so she may be able to provide some commentary around some of that longer term work, although noting that the Waipa is looking at an ongoing program. So pass over to either Emily or Chloe.
Morena, apologies for not being there in person. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Greg. So, yes, Councillor Clarkson, he very much hear in zones like this that wider catchment work is really critical. And so as part of our river management activity, we are looking at the system as a whole, and it's more around bank stability and those sorts of things, and looking at how we can work with the natural environment. And while we refer to things like gravel management, I do want to take the opportunity just to highlight that gravel management is probably not what many of us think of today of how it was carried out. When we carry out gravel management or any in-channel work, we have had to work quite hard to retrain some of our contractors to leave a messy, what they feel is a messy site, so that we are maintaining a run river pool, that we are maintaining key gravel beds and sort of high points within the system, so that we keep fish habitat. And as part of our river management activity, we actually put LWDs, large woody debris, back in the channel to create that fish habitat. So well gone are the days where river management is how do we straighten it, channel it, and keep it nice and uniform. It's very much thinking about what is going on within that system. In terms of the riparian restoration component of your question, that doesn't fall under the river management activity. So the teams are working really closely with our catchment management staff to look at where additional planting might be appropriate. And then that, of course, has a landowner requirement for contribution in areas like the Coromandel. So it's very much working with the landowner, establishing what's needed, getting in and doing the initial remediation work, which is what a lot of these costs are, is that first go in, remove large blockages, remove big amounts of debris, any fallen trees, those sorts of things, stabilise areas where we can, and then come back in for a more sort of proactive approach around bank stability and any follow-up planting.
So just on that, Emily, is the finances required to do the work that Bruce was referring to separate with the catchment as opposed to the river? So that's a different budget from what we're talking about here.
It is a different budget, and we can apply under the criteria for the reserves for the catchment management sort of type restoration activities, such as riparian planting. It sits outside of the funding policy.
Okay, just wondering whether, Kerry, you've got any comments in relation to the Waipa?
Morena koutou. Yeah, so very similar to Emily, ours is focused on river management and rebuilding or repairing river management assets that have been damaged in the floods. Where there was work that involved riparian planting, where we were partway through the work and then the flood hit, so our river management had not yet been doing its job, and so planting might have been lost as part of that. We're supporting landowners to do replanting through a separate budget. But I think one of the aspects around the policy is just looking at if we were to support through the reserve replanting of riparian margins, then it would require a more contribution into the reserve. That would be very expensive to replace plants that had been lost. So, well-established riparian margins that had been impacted, that would be, I think, cost prohibitive under the current policy.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Murray and then Councillor Cookson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I'm just going through the various schemes and that, and just looking at that Waihau Valley scheme and the electrical call-outs, obviously something I'm familiar with. Just a question around, is that an indication of either aging or failing equipment?
It's interesting. Robbie and I and Greg just had a pre-meeting and Robbie's raised the same issue, and I'm not sure whether that's the question he's got. But he wanted to know the costs of actually that infrastructure, or whether it's running costs, whatever. So, Greg.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so we do have Jody Coatsian online as well, who's our Waihau Zone Manager, and we have Adam in the room. Adam may be most appropriate for Jody in the first instance. Yeah. Are you there, Jody?
Yes, I am, but Adam can take this one.
Sorry, Jody, didn't hear that?
Adam's going to take it.
All right, Adam, thank you. Nice hospital pass.
Yeah. So I understand the electrical element of that is the call outs that we do to our contractors, electricians who come out and help to ensure that the flood pumps, which draw upon quite a bit of electricity during these high flood times, we get a lot of surges. Some of the pumps trip, and so we're having to have the electricians come out at short notice after hours to try and reinstate the power, the switchboards that might trip, and getting those pumps back up and running. So I understand that's the nature. There's also sometimes we have to hire generators to provide some electricity backup to some of our major pump stations as well, just to ensure that they maintain the level of service where possible, because there was quite a number of power outages that occurred during the events as well. So does that answer your questions?
Well, yeah, just around so are we looking at doing remedial work so this isn't a problem in the future in these weather events, or just trying to get my head around where that sort of sits?
And that's exactly the point that Robbie, can I just bring you in here, Robbie? So we don't have you asking the same question. Is there anything you can expand on in that area that you wanted to address?
No, you're fine. You answer it, because my question was something else. So you've already got that. So you continue.
All right, thank you. So Robbie was, if I remember the conversation, Greg helped me out here, but there's an expenditure of $150,000. So is that to hire a generator, or is that to do the call outs? You know, we just wanted a little bit more detail, perhaps, and a breakdown as to, there's about an aggregation here of different cost codes, and it's not really giving us a picture of what's actually been going on. So are you able to give us that, or who's put their hand up there? Jody, is it?
He's come back on.
Jody.
Yes, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so similar to what Adam said, so it's the combination of electrical call-outs, but also quite a lot of contractor call-outs, excavators moving around to clear blockages. We had quite a lot of trees down, causing blockages that were addressed immediately, as well as floodgate blockages, which we have to respond to and address immediately as well. You'll see that there's a separate cost in there for temporary pumping at the Roger Harris pump station, and that was due to the pump station being down due to the planned construction work. It's part of our shovel-ready projects. Does that help clarify?
It does. I'm not sure it's the detail. We probably need a little bit more detail, and our discussion prior to this one was about getting an understanding of the costs of the breakdowns, the cost of hiring, and whether going into the LTP, we should have a discussion on whether we should have generators in reserve, because hiring them over a period of time, even 2 or 3 years, and in some cases maybe less, we would cover the cost of having those, and we would have them guaranteed being available. So it's a wider discussion for the LTP.
And that was a bit of the background to my question, Noel. Yeah, thanks.
Yep. So that's something. So if I can just go to Robbie, can we just have your question before I go to Greg?
Mine was just supporting what the staff had said about having to do that inland, channel work in the river, and that they best put it back to the state that it was in, and not perfect, but and so enhancing the biodiversity in the situation they've got. So me and Noel saw that when we went on the trip up Coromandel, and I support the staff at the work they do, and in the constraints of their of what they have to do it in. Yeah, so I was just supporting what Emily and the speaker after her said. So thank you. Cheers.
Just on that, just after I think Gabriel, you and I went over to Pyroar, and Kenny took us out to some of the rivers there, and the boulders were taller than I was, and the channel was full of rock of all sorts of sizes. So there's been an incredible amount of work, and we saw some of that on the Coromandel. And it's not really until you see it that you actually can believe the magnitude of what's happening there. So thank you, Robbie. Going to Greg.
Yeah, so just to come back to the initial inquiry, so we'll take away an action to provide a bit more detail around the kind of work that we get done in the space, and particularly whether there's any resilience improving actions that we see as opportunities down the track, because certainly some stuff is unavoidable, but there will be other ways that we may be able to invest smarter in our assets.
Thank you. Ben.
Yeah, you noted here that beyond this year, there's an additional 3 million in the
Can you
river.
tell us what page you're on, please?
Page 12, item 34. Beyond the 22-23, that there's need for further additional remedial work identified in the river part for 3 million over the next 3 years. And then number 41, again, 2.3 million over 2 years, primarily in the Waihau zone. There's quite a bit of additional expenditure there. Is this something you're coming back to us through the LTP for, or, and the other question is, how do you replenish this emergency type funding?
Yeah, so 2 questions there. In terms of the forward work program, there are a number of options for funding that. There is a bit of government funding floating around at the moment that we are putting our hands up for where we can. There are business as usual river management budgets that we have, and there are also use of reserves, both operational reserves and disaster reserves. And so we will, if we need to come back to you for a further conversation around the funding of that work, we will. At this stage, it's only appropriate that we're coming to you to cover off the expenditure that's already been incurred, and the need to transfer that from our disaster reserves.
So just before we go to Robbie, where does that money get replenished? Well, the reserves may run out, so how do they get replenished?
Yes, and that's also an LTP conversation that we've signalled, because obviously this experience with running through our weather events has, I guess, highlighted the kind of impact that we can see, that we can expect to see in our catchments and outside the realm of hard infrastructure as well. So in this case, we've got a lot of impact on our natural assets, our river management assets. We've identified a few opportunities where we may need to, may seek to improve our existing policies. The question around replenishment of the reserve, at the moment, they're not being replenished, but that will also be an LTP conversation that we've flagged for consideration.
All right.
Oh, I'm concerned it wasn't mentioned in the report that we're not replenishing this. I thought that this was an additional, you draw down and it gets repurposed, because
I want to use your mic.
Hi.
too.
That's it.
Temperature of the rating.
a percentage of the income every year gets siphoned off into that reserve.
So through, I can take an action to confirm that point of discussion.
I would have thought so. That was my recollection of it.
Good practice would have said that you would replenish
Yeah.
provision for it. Okay, every year you'd
We
provision a
we
small
don't
amount.
decide to pull it up now and again when we've got spare cash.
Well, there, so we've got an action point to clarify that. So Ben, did you have a supplement?
No, it was just that's I was perfectly happy to sign off on the 2 million, but I assumed it would be because every
replenished.
year we're going to get this sort of thing happening in
One
future.
would think that that's the practice that we are. So we'll
Because
get that
if
checked.
that's not happening, we've got to get another agenda item ASAP. because
Absolutely.
That's how it used to happen.
Yeah, so we'll get
Can't
that checked.
imagine it
We
was
have
stopped.
a couple more meetings before the end of the year. So Robbie, did you have a point, please?
Oh, sorry, Noel, couldn't turn my hand off. Sorry.
That's right. Warren.
Thanks, Noel. Yeah, I'd just like to congratulate the staff on getting the government-funded resilience and remediation fund and turning that application around in 4 days and being successful for quite a big piece of it. So well done to the staff and getting that government money.
I think we'd all endorse that. Well done. So if there's no further questions, we have a resolution in front of us. It's up on the board. Yep. So is there someone prepared to move that? Thank you, Ben. Is
Yes.
there someone second?
Yeah,
Thank
Robbie.
you, Warren. So we've got Ben and Warren. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, team, staff. Well presented report. It was pretty clear. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just noting the comment in the chat from Karen Nielsen around the reserves being mentioned in paragraph 10, just might.
Paragraph 10. Do we need to pick that up before we move on? Oh, yeah, that's the balance as that. The issue is with how they're replenished. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, just through the chair, it just talks about the percentage of the targeted rate each year for each zone that's allocated to the reserve. So it's just in paragraph 10 in the paper.
I suppose then that point's covered, but whether that's going to be enough going forward, because we seem to we have these regular disasters now or weather events, and if that is to become the norm, should we be adjusting our baselines going forward to deal with the new norm? Because if we stay stuck in the past, we will not have sufficient monies available to deal with it when we need to. So that's probably the LTP conversation we need. Is this sufficient to continue going forward? If staff could capture that. Thank you. All right, we'll move to the next item. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this item is around appointments to our scheme subcommittees and a reasonably self-explanatory paper around appointments from the Department of Conservation across Waikato and Hauraki subcommittees, as well as an appointment from the Waikato District Council to the Waikato Scheme Subcommittee. What I would note is that in addition to the names noted in the paper, we have, after the publishing of the agenda, also received a nomination from the Thames Coromandel District Council for the Hauraki Scheme Subcommittee. That is up on the screen now as an amendment to the recommendation that has been put forward in the agenda, Mr. Chairman.
This is fairly self-explanatory. We've still got some nominations to come in from iwi, but that is ongoing through discussions, and that will be addressed accordingly. And I think coming back to council next month is a paper on changing the terms of reference, because at the moment it includes directors and elected members, I think, from iwi, but Waikato Tainui has asked for the ability to nominate the best person who could be outside of that. So I think I've got it captured it roughly that there's an amendment to allow the iwi to nominate who they think is the best person for the role. That's coming to council. But in the meantime, we've got these. Is there any questions before? Thank you, Stu.
Just something that occurred to me the other day when I was reading this. I guess the landowner reps, one of a better word, that we appoint, we have the ability, if they're not playing the game or their behaviour's not up to our expectations, we can do something about it. What's our mechanism if an appointee from DOC or District Council? It hasn't happened, but it's just something I think we should probably be a little bit aware of. And
Yeah, I mean, through Mr. Chair, all appointees are confirmed by this committee.
they are, so we do have the ability to.
And they're subject to the code of conduct and statutory standing orders.
They're subject to the behaviour we expect that's outlined in the code of conduct. I don't know that our code of conduct would have a lawful mechanism to be applied in the way that we can apply it to councillors.
I would think the standing orders, because it's
Okay.
a subcommittee of a committee of council, that the standing orders would cover, because a penalty under standing order, under code of conduct, is that you can be removed from committee. You could be removed from the chair or deputy chair role. So I would think that the standing orders would be sufficient to remove someone should it be necessary.
Okay, cool.
Hopefully we don't have to go through that.
Yeah, no, worst case scenario.
So look, I'm prepared to move this. Is there anyone prepared to second it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Stu. All in favour? Against? Carried. I believe that is the business of the meeting. And before I close, can we look at the closing Karakia?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unahia mai te uru tapu nui, ki wātia, ki mama, ki nāko, te tinana, te hininaro, te ara takatū, koia rā e rongo, e whakaria ake ki I runga, ki a tina, haume, huie, tae ki e.
And so on that note, I will close the meeting and thank you all for attending.